we're going to go through each of these games, but we've got some segments highlighted for you all. We're going to be taking a look at some head to heads here, ones that we're going to be keeping an eye on in particular, because even though this is the final match week of group play for Challenge Cup, there are a couple groups that needed to go down to the wire. I mean, it wouldn't be NWSL if it wasn't down to the wire in terms of decision making. Well, let's take a look at some all or nothing matches that are going to be taking place this weekend, Lisa. And I think we have to start with the match that's going to be on Big Network CBS. It's going to be North Carolina Courage versus Washington Spirit on CBS, 1 p.m. Eastern kickoff time for this one. North Carolina Courage are on top of the East region right now with 11 points, but right behind them are Washington Spirit with 9 points. I think folks are going to be keying in to this match as a must watch because of all of the stakes that are on the line in the East region here in this one.
Everything is on the line in the East region, with North Carolina currently sitting in first place. They clinch first place in the East standings with a win over Washington. However, if Washington wins, they clinch a first place spot in the East region. This matchup is huge because the last time these two teams played, it was tied 2-2. So neither of these teams have lost in the Challenge Cup. They have also Both teams have scored 10 goals in the Challenge Cup so far between North Carolina and Washington. On paper, these two teams are incredibly evenly matched. They really are. I think that's what makes it so exciting. But this is definitely the biggest match that I am most excited for North Carolina. When we dive in on them a little bit, they're coming off a 4-2 win over Orlando Pride. There was an own goal. Jaylene Daniels, Taylor Smith, and Davinia all scoring goals in that match against Orlando. North Carolina has scored a goal in every single match they've played. They are only one of two Challenge Cup teams to do so, OL Reign being the other team. And North Carolina, they lead the Challenge Cup with percentage of possession per match, and also in the most passes per game. However, on the stat sheet, when you dive a little bit deeper, North Carolina has the lowest forward pass rate in the Challenge Cup, only at 33%. So they're keeping the ball, but their first option isn't to go forward. It's not to move down the pitch. It's not to combine and find their forwards' feet, look to just keep the ball. They're instead passing it backwards. So now when you look at a team like Washington Spirit, they're coming off a road win versus Gotham FC. Rodman had a brace in that match. Ashley Sanchez scored a goal. She had an assist to one of Rodman's goals. Washington Spirit leads the Challenge Cup in chances created per game at 17 chances. Andy Sullivan and Ashley Sanchez are tied at 17 chances created. So those two players are leading the league. So the opportunities for Washington Spirit to score goals are all there. The last time we talked about North Carolina and the win that they came off of over Orlando Pride, Sandra, I posed a question to you in our recap of that match saying, is North Carolina scoring all of these goals because of their offensive pressure and the skill and the talent and the type of goals they're scoring, or have they gotten lucky with bad opponents' defensive plays? And this is the match against Washington Spirit that this question will be answered for us because, of course, every goal is incredibly hard to score. So no matter how North Carolina does it, whether it's an own goal or it just bobbles around and ends up in the back of the net, it's still a goal. A goal is a goal is a goal, and they're hard to do score goals. When you go up against a team like Washington Spirit that is very sound defensively, they have only 5 goals against in the Challenge Cup. This is going to be a battle between these two sides, and they're fighting for a chance in the Challenge Cup playoffs because they've faced each other before. They faced Orlando, they faced Gotham, and it all comes down to this weekend, and they're playing in North Carolina. That's kind of my overview on some of the numbers between these two sides.
No, I like it. I think it's just it's adding more to the table that's already set for these two teams, come Saturday when they go head to head on CBS. I just am looking at this match and there's some undertones to it where I'm like, is this perhaps a bit of a a playoff preview that we're gonna get. We're very much in the early stages of 2022, and the regular season is still on the horizon. But we're getting a taste and a first glimpse at some of these clubs and how they are going to look a little bit, during certain stretches of the regular season. And I think with these two teams going head to head, both playing within this East region of the Challenge Cup, getting closer looks at these two teams and sort of this, I don't know if you call it a rivalry or such, but some of the games that these two particular clubs, when they go head to head, they kind of come out with some very entertaining soccer. So I'm looking forward to this match in particular, especially with the high stakes that are involved. And I do have that in the back of my mind as perhaps maybe this is a little bit of a playoff preview that we can get depending on how things shake out towards the end of the regular season down the stretch, and especially within these two teams in this division, what we saw from them earlier in the Challenge Cup to where we are now in this sort of final week of action. When we're looking at the teams in the East, we're seeing the progression and the growth of North Carolina and Washington Spirit versus maybe the two other teams in their region right now with Orlando Pride and Gotham. With you have a couple of teams that are still searching, still have some question marks around them, whereas you have a couple other teams in the Courage and the Spirit that have kind of picked up some answers along the way of their results here in
Yeah.
Challenge Cup. So I'm with you. I think there's still one final question that has to be answered, and you highlighted it here in this matchup. So I'm looking forward to this one. In terms of a pick, I really hope there is a winner and a loser in this one, but we did chat a little bit off mic, Lisa, and you know what? Challenge Cup is for chaos. I think this one might end in a draw, and I think I'm going to settle with that. I think I'm going in a draw in this one. I hope it's a high one. I think I would like to see another 2-2 and get some excitement in it, but I do think it's going to shake out as a draw between this one. Are you picking one way or the other in this match?
So before I give my pick, if this game ends in a draw, North Carolina will end with 12 points and Washington Spirit will end with 10. So North Carolina will move on to the Challenge Cup semifinals, moving on to the next round, and Washington will be done. So you essentially have North Carolina moving on. I'm just
Yeah,
going to say that there.
I just think it's going to be a draw.
This was really tricky for me to pick. I still don't even know because I think that this matchup is going to be so good from the first whistle until the very end of this game. It's going to be a battle all over the pitch. Half of my heart is thinking Washington's going to win this game because of the momentum that they have. They have come from behind in a number of their games. They've scored a lot of goals. They are just consistently getting into a rhythm. Every single game, we're seeing the partnerships growing between the players on Washington Spirit's team. I mean, Sanchez getting a goal and an assist last game, Rodman getting a brace last game. That partnership right there between Ashley Sanchez and Trinity Rodman is huge. Trinity Rodman tied right now in the Challenge Cup with Mallory Pugh for most goals at 4. So there's a lot that makes me want to say Washington Spirit. However, I'm going to go with North Carolina winning this one. I believe that Sean Nahas wants to win the Challenge Cup. Not that Chris Ward doesn't, not that Washington Spirit doesn't, but I think that Sean Nahas has a lot to prove because so many people thought this was going to be a bit of a rebuild year for North Carolina. And he has come into this Challenge Cup and shown that this is not a rebuild year. He has very talented players. He knows how to put them on the pitch, how to communicate with them in game moments, how to adapt on the fly to what happens. I have North Carolina taking this one. I hope it's a shootout. I hope we get like 3-2, 4-3. I just want a lot of crazy chaos goals, which we saw 2-2 last time these two sides played. But I have North Carolina winning this one. So technically, we both have North Carolina moving on to the semifinals.
All right. I'll take it just in different paths, but similar scenarios for you and I in terms of the pick in this one. I mean, we'll see how these things shake out. Again, we're doing the preview for everybody. We're making our picks here for our listeners. But there's some things that are going to come into play as the teams get closer to match day. Things like availability reports will be made available, and based off of the previous matches, if the Spirit gets somebody like Andy Sullivan back in the mix for this final game, that's going to have a huge sway in things. We finally got to see a little bit of Emily Sonnet getting some minutes for this Washington Spirit side, so we'll see. There might be some things down the stretch closer to match day that come into play in terms of this, but for now, now. We've got a win and a draw, still going the way of Carolina. Now, the Spirit could still advance even if they do pick up a draw against North Carolina Courage. They could advance as the best number 2 seed out of all the groups, but they would need a Portland Thorns loss and a Chicago Red Stars draw and or loss as well, should they draw with North Carolina Courage on Saturday. Let's take a look at the other match that has huge stakes. It's Kansas City Current versus Chicago Red Stars. When we're looking at the Central region, Kansas City currently leads the Central with first place with 10 points. Chicago Red Stars right behind them in the Central region with 8 points. Now, obviously, a draw or a win ensures that Kansas City will advance by clinching number 1. If Chicago goes ahead and defeats Kansas City and gets the win, they will claim first place in the Central. If Chicago ends up losing this match or even drawing, they cannot advance as the second best runner-up. So everything is on the table for these two teams in the Central region. When you're looking at these two teams going head to head, Lisa, do you have a definitive pick and why?
I think Kansas City Current's going to come out on top of this one. I do have a definitive pick. This is why it's our all or nothing segment right now between North Carolina and Washington, and then Kansas City and Chicago. Everything is on the table. The stakes are really high for all 4 of these clubs. Kansas City, they're coming off a 2-1 home win against Houston Dash. Their possession, Kansas City's possession in the Challenge Cup, is essentially last out of all 12 teams. They've only got some crazy numbers for listeners if they're interested in this. 584 touches per game, 368 pass attempts per game, and 70% pass completion. Those 3 stats, they are last in all Challenge Cup competitions for this year. Also, they only average about 15 seconds of possession time, which is the shortest possession time in all of the Challenge Cup. So Kansas City, despite being on top in the Central region, scoring 8 goals in this Challenge Cup, they have kept the ball the least amount. So I think that says a lot about what kind of team they are, because they are moving quickly in transition. They're looking to get shots off. They're looking to find Kristen Hamilton up top. And this is a Kansas City Current side that has faced a lot of adversity in this short Challenge Cup that we have seen, because Lynn Williams going down early with an injury, Sam Ewis being on limited minutes. Again, we don't know the availability report at the time of this recording, if Sam Ewis is going to get more minutes, how she's faring. They've just been through a lot, and they've still weathered a lot of the storm throughout this Challenge Cup. It's actually been really fun and impressive to watch Matt Potter's side in Kansas City Current. The last time Kansas City and Chicago played at the end of March, just a few weeks ago, Kansas City won 2-1 in that match, with Haley Mace and Kristen Hamilton being the leaders. Kansas City also went down early in that match. It was a goal from Vanessa DiBernardo early in the first half that gave Chicago the lead heading into halftime, and Kansas City able to respond in the second half. So they have a lot of momentum coming their way for Kansas City. They're coming off a win as well. Now for Chicago, Red Stars are coming off a 1-1 road draw with Racing Louisville. This was also a game that Chicago had a lead early in this game, and they ended up losing it. The late game equalizer coming from Amina Ekic on a free kick, a set piece opportunity outside the box. So that's first against Kansas City. They lose the lead and they end up losing. Now, their very last match that they just played against Racing Louisville, they lose the lead. So we might see Chicago score first, but can they defend a lead, which we haven't seen that much in this Challenge Cup so far from the Red Stars? And that's what makes me think that Kansas City just has a little bit more grit in them to pull off this win. I also think we talked about it with North Carolina and Sean Nahas wanting this as a way to prove themselves. I think Kansas City wants to make it far in the Challenge Cup as a way to prove themselves, especially because when you look at the Central region, between Kansas City, Chicago, Racing Louisville, and Houston Dash. This is a series that Kansas City can win. Now, when it gets opened up to the entire league, I think Kansas City going against some teams like OL Reign, Portland Thorns, even Washington Spirit, they will be tested very differently. But for Matt Potter and Kansas City, they want to get out of this group stage. They want to move on. I think they have the edge over Chicago. I have Kansas City winning this one. Sandra, I'm sorry I'm not going with your home side, but I have for a lot of this Challenge Cup. What are you thinking?
Listen,
After I lay out some of these stats for you, what are you thinking?
I've appreciated every single time you've come on here and you've gone Chicago's way. It's been music to my ears every single time. I think for this final match, I'm going to be doing that this time. I'm going to be going with the local team. I think Chicago Red Stars are going to be looking at this game for what it is. It's absolutely kind of a winner take all kind of mentality. They win, they get to continue on with the Challenge Cup. They lose, and that means they have to start prepping for their regular season a little bit earlier than anticipated. But I think going off of that last match, I'm glad you brought it up. When they went head to head at SeatGeek Stadium and sort of kind of the gritty, kind of grindy weather match that
Oh,
it was
yeah.
between these two teams. It's kind of a cold evening, right? But I do remember coming out of that match and hearing the post game and listening to some of the Red Stars players who were available after the match and head coach Chris Petroselli. They were frustrated at that loss in that game. They felt that they had the better of the play, that they were the ones with the better opportunities in the match, and unfortunately that they were unable to capitalize on that. So there was frustration from the Chicago Red Stars side that I think might motivate them a little bit on the road against Kansas City as the team that is currently in the win or in the win column as far as
Mhm.
being in first. Uh, so going on the road to Kansas City, knowing that they have a better position to advance, whether they maybe draw or win, obviously. And Chicago has the mentality of it has to be a must win. And that
Yeah.
more or less controls their destiny. Don't want to leave things up to fate otherwise. So I think a lot's going to come down again to availability. Um, we saw Malpew have to come out of that previous match
Yep.
where they utilized the concussion protocol, and we will see how
Morgan
Morgan
Gautrat wasn't
Morgan is
listed in the
available.
last game
Yeah.
either.
We'll see if Morgan Gautrat is a player who is available for this match as well. Those are going to be two huge pieces for the Red Stars, and I think if those two players are available in any capacity, it will be beneficial for them. But I think without them, it'll force a new type of challenge that this team has yet to sort of be faced with. If they do find themselves missing their star striker in Pew or somebody like Morgan Gautrat. So I'm curious to see Chicago take this win, but I'm also curious to see how they're going to do it.
I think that's a really good point about how they're going to do it. And when you look at potential injuries, because we don't know the status of Mallory Pugh or Morgan Gautrat, if they are even 50%, do you think they get time? I mean, this is the Challenge Cup. You have a very long season
Yeah.
ahead of you. If I'm head coach for the Red Stars, Chris Petroselli, I'm not putting Mallory Pugh in if she
Yeah.
even has like a hint of any injury happening for Morgan Gautrat as well. You want them for the long run.
Oh yeah. I mean that's not an unfair question to ask, and I think that percentage is not worth it, quite frankly, when
Yeah.
you have so much of the season in front of you. And for those types of players, Gatra is a player that kind of picked up this little nagging injury from camps with the national team. And you have Amal Pugh, who has been in and out of national team camps as well, kind of lighting it up for both club and country. So these are two players with sort of two things on their plate, whether when it comes to responsibilities for soccer, both for club and country. So I think if the threshold is 50% and top flipping a coin, you're not putting these players in this type of game, and you're trying to figure out how to advance in Challenge Cup with what you have, which is not a territory that this team is unfamiliar with. This is the same team that had to face a ton of injuries down the stretch of their NWSL Championship playoff run last year. So it's not unfamiliar territory with them.
And
But
the reserves that Chicago has, this is no drop off in talent. I mean, we've seen a player like Amanda Kowalski get signed, make a start a few days after getting signed, and
Yeah.
then get a goal in her very second NWSL match after being a non-roster invitee to the preseason. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of talent.
Yeah, so if it has to be, if it, come game day, if it has to be without those two types of players, I would still like to see it because I want to see what the Red Stars, sort of challenge themselves with in the event that they don't have a Malpew to rely on. So we'll see what happens out of these two matches, particularly the two matches that we're going to be keeping a close eye for All or Nothing this weekend.